On the Track is a web TV show about cryptozoology, natural history, green issues and whatever else the team feel like making up as they go along. Enjoy!
So what's in today's show, Mr. John?
Well, Hannes, this week we have the second part of our interview with those two jolly nice fellows from Heath, Denmark.
And are they the ones who think that I'm a Gnostic icon?
Well, yes, Hannes, one of them is. Anyway, Simon is convinced that you and Abraxas are one and the same.
But I only know the name Abraxas from that album by Santana.
Well, Hannes, I think you're going to have to read up on your Gnosticism. But first, as well as the interview with those two jolly nice Danish chaps, we have a visit to our old friend Ian Squibb.
I really like the old credits.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name's John Downs, and something is happening, but you don't know what it is, do you, Mr. Jones?
It's Gwen Dibley's Pearls of Wisdom.
The husband gathers with a fan, the woman scuttles with a spoon. There will never be a he.
So, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Once again, my name is Jonathan Downs. I'm the director of the Centre for Fortean Zoology, and welcome to another episode of On the Track. For those of you not in the know, and I suspect most of you are, but for those of you who are not in the know, every Wednesday evening at 6:30 for about a quarter of an hour, and every Saturday afternoon at 3 for about twice that, we bring you a general mishmash of hard science, weird shit, and surreality. What's surreality? Well, do we really have to go through this again?
Yes, I think that we probably do.
Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm here now to talk properly about what's in today's show. But first, I have some parish notices. First of all, I want to announce that we have a new assistant director in the Centre for Fortean Zoology. I'd like to welcome and congratulate the lovely Gwyn Palmer, who has been looking after the job while I was ill and while I was in hospital, and to be quite honest, will be absolutely fabulous at the job, and I can't think of anybody who'd do it better. She's an absolute darling, and she has worked very hard for the CFZ and deserves all of it. What do you think, Louis? Because here's Louis.
Gwyn is a good egg, not only a good egg, but going to help lead this organisation forward, and will also help to appeal to a younger generation.
So, what do younger people think about cryptozoology then, Louis?
Well, don't put me on the spot to come up with a creative quote. Young people don't need cryptozoology. Oh, it's pumpkin spice latte season at Starbucks. We have that.
You really are an idiot. Okay, the next piece of news is the latest edition of Animals and Men is now for sale on Amazon, which means that you can get it on the link below, but also it means that the last issue, issue 72, is now available for free as a flip book on the CFZ website, and you can get it at this link. Golly, there's lots and lots of links here. What do you think about links, Louis?
No, people don't need Lynx. Lynx is a deodorant for...
And here we need to apologise to the jolly nice people from the Lynx Deodorant Company, because although they haven't heard what Louis said, in fact no one will have heard what Louis said because I deleted it, I'm sure that the negative vibes will have reverberated throughout the noosphere. Okay, what are we talking about today, Ian?
We're going to have a look at a British big cat photo that has emerged recently, which on the surface should be conclusive evidence for the existence of these beasts in the UK. So, the story behind the photo goes as follows. When Sue Harwood's sensible and intelligent friend told her about two very large cats he'd sighted in Stoke-on-Trent, she was thrown. "He's not the sort of guy who'd make it up," said Sue. "He saw two very large black cats. He said there was no way these were domestic cats. They were far too big." Yet her friend, who she didn't name, has felt unable to report or tell the story since. He was so shocked by it, he said that no one will believe me. So he only told me and his other half, Ms. Harwood explained. Her friend's story is echoed by dog walkers, ramblers and locals who frequent Sprawling Park in the location where the photo was taken. Some others have seen a paw print, or what might be the outline of a big black beast, or at least know someone who has. And now, Ms. Harwood's friend's two sightings, which took place about 10 years ago, have been cast in a new light after the clearest ever photo of a big cat prowling the British countryside was unearthed. The photo sat among junk mail in a filing cabinet and was found with some text scrawled on the reverse side. It said it was the last sighting of the beast of Smallthorne. Smallthorne is a densely populated suburb of Stoke that opens out onto about a 225-acre nature reserve packed with tall grassland and shrubbery. The picture, described by experts as astonishing and the best photo of a British big cat that exists, is said to have been taken there on the 17th of March, although the year is not known. Okay then, John, let's have a look at this great photo, and we can look at that there, and there it is. Wow. Well, you can't argue, can you?
I'm just about to. But first of all, when it says that experts have heaped praise on the photograph, do we know who these experts are?
It doesn't say. So, and also it doesn't say who the key witness was either. But no, we don't know who the experts are. All we have is the photo. But there is definitely a large wild cat, panther, perhaps. Definitely not a domestic cat. And if the photo hasn't been tampered with, and if the photo was taken in the UK, and if it hasn't escaped from a zoo or a private collection, then it proves that such animals exist in Britain. And in future, you'll have to think twice before you go out on that leisurely walk in the countryside. So yeah, hours after the photograph emerged early last month, the Daily Telegraph visited the nature reserve, which is a former colliery surrounded by housing estates. Dense trees cloak the perimeter, and the interior is largely silent. Adders, bugs, and foxes live in the reserve, and the wildlife is only interrupted by a steady stream of dog walkers. Some locals are rattled by what they saw, by the thought that a large beast could be living among them in such an urban area. One woman whose house backs onto the park said, "It's not something you would expect to see around here. I'll stay away from the area now until something has been found out. I used to go down there all the time, but now I'm worried. How do you handle something like that if it's pouncing at you?" Yeah, good point. She's not the only one who is a little unnerved. Barker, 77, a former delivery driver, said he saw a few prints in the grass on a gate while shooting several miles away on Gunmore about 20 years ago. They were pretty big, so there are some about. There used to be wallabies up there. A bloke brought them in the 1920s and let them out all over, he said. Experts have suggested that black panthers, which are either jaguars or leopards, have a melanism which darkens the body's tissue and pigmentation, began breeding in Britain after the Dangerous Wild Animals Act of 1976 made it much tougher to own leopards as pets, meaning some were released into the wild. Well, that's just irresponsible if you do that, isn't it? Surely a zoo can take them. You don't have to go and release a wild animal. But anyway, so John, here we have the that's basically the background to the photo and the area. So you've got some information regarding this photo which we may find interesting, haven't you?
Well, yes, because the photograph was actually sent to me. It was the last,
right,
either 3 or 4, I can't exactly remember, without going back over the notes, photographs which were sent to me anonymously in the first 3 months of 2012. My old friend and colleague, Dr. Carl Schuker, looked at the first couple and pronounced them fake. He even found the original picture from which the image had been photoshopped, not photocopied. And as each successive picture arrived, I sent it to Carl, and he identified where it had come from. I sent our Staffordshire representatives down to check the nature reserve out, and there were no signs. They found no signs of footprints or hair or anything else. And they told me that the thing that surprised them most was how small the nature reserve actually was. And the person writing in the newspaper is completely right. It is in the middle, surrounded by council estates. And the thing is about all big cats is they have huge ranges. They can range over an enormous area of ground and would be very unlikely to just live forever in a remarkably small nature park in between council estates where kids go out and fly kites or play football or whatever it is kids do these days. And courting couples go out to make out in the bushes. It's absolutely seriously unlikely that anything would live there. But the thing is that far from this being the biggest piece of evidence for the existence of big cats in Britain of all time, nothing of the sort. It is a mystery which Dr. Schuker and I solved 11 years ago. And how
well done.
Up getting into the public domain like this, I don't know. I don't have any particular objection to it getting into the public domain. I am objecting if somebody's gone and nicked something from our archives without telling us. That is not the sort of thing which I would encourage. And if anybody had wanted to know the story, it's all over the old CFZ blogs, and I can give you the links here. And these links will tell the whole story And because they've been date and time stamped, you can see that this isn't something that I'm making up in order to make us look good. But sadly, somebody else is making it up in order to make them look good.
So, the search for Britain's elusive big cats continues.
And now for the second part of our chat with those two lovely fellows from Heath, Denmark.
And let me start about the sea monk. That's probably the most famous Danish cryptid or legendary beast. Already as early as in the 16th century, it became famous as far away as France and Spain. And as late as 2021, the American heavy metal group Krallich, they used a 16th century illustration of the sea monk by a French scientist named William Rondelet as the cover art for the album Demonic Wealth. So again, the sea monk is still pretty well known. There were actually creatures who were like seen all over Europe back then, and they were described as like looking like these kind of like fish around like 2 meters long that like had heads similar to humans, complete with like this kind of like tonsure like haircut like a Catholic monk, and either like their clothes or their covering of scales, or sometimes wrinkled skin. That's something individual accounts they differ in. They were like shaped almost like a monk's cloaks, but the difference were that these sea monks, they had like fins like a fish instead of arms and legs, and instead of legs they had this kind of like long fish tail. The thing about, at some point in the middle of the 16th century, contemporary sources disagree. A Danish biographer of the royal family named A. Sørensen Vedel, he wrote in 1588 that the sea monk was caught in 1545, but another contemporary Danish historian from the 16th century, Arild Huitfeldt, he wrote in his 1595 history of Denmark that it was caught in 1550, that a sea monk was caught alive in Øresund. That's the strait between the east coast of Zealand and Sweden's west coast, with Copenhagen on one side and the Swedish city Malmö on the other side. And anyway, this sea monk was brought alive before King Christian III of Denmark. The king, he then tried to communicate with the sea monk, and he even summoned human priests to communicate with the sea monk, but with no success, because the sea monk, he made no sound whatsoever other than deep sighs. And according to some sources, the king then let the sea monk swim around in the moat of his castle for 3 days until the sea monk died. And again, that castle is one of the main attractions on our Mons tour. Again, what happened after the sea monk died, that's something that the primary sources, they also disagree about. According to a Swiss doctor named Konrad Gessner, the body of the sea monk was preserved and dried and sent to the Duke of Mecklenburg in Germany. But according to other sources, like the Danish historians Nicolas Krag and Stephen Stephanius, the sea monk was given a proper Christian burial, but it was given an unmarked grave in order to avoid causing panic and confusion among the general public, and perhaps to prevent future grave desecrations of the sea monk's final resting place. For a long time, there was a general consensus that the sea monk was a mistaken identity case involving a giant squid, and that theory was most famously argued for by a Danish zoologist named Japetus Stenstrup, he made an argument for the sea monk being a mistaken giant squid in an article that was published in 1854. And again, it's important to mention here that the giant squid, that was largely considered a mythical beast and a figure of fable until the 19th century. Anyway, Japetus Stenstrup's argument for the sea monk being a misidentified giant squid, it goes: a giant squid, it swims with its tail first, and its tail has this kind of tapering shape that like goes towards the end, that kind of with these kind of that kind of like resembles a monk's robe, and these two fins that the squid that the squid uses to steer with, it goes up into this kind of like flap or fold of skin around around the end. And again, then the 16th century people, they would have mistook this conical tail with this kind of flap of skin for like the monks for the monk's tonsure and the neck crave on its on his robe, because they mistook the tail of the squid for the head. And then these fins that the squid uses to swim with, they were then mistaken for the arm fins of the sea monk, and the tentacles for the tail fins of the sea monk. And then the sea monk's deep sighs, they would then have been the sound of its gills pumping out water. And that's another thing about giant squid, that when beached, they can actually still survive for several days if they're on moist ground or in the moist air. And again, notice that after being caught, the sea monk survived after 3 days. Here in 2005, two marine biologists named Charles Paxton and Robert Holland, they gave an argument for another possible identity for the sea monk being another known animal, namely the angel shark, known in Latin as Squatina squatina. But anyway, the angel shark, this has this kind of like flattened body with a rounded head that according to Paxton and Holland would be like more likely to be mistaken for this human-like shaved head like a monk than the tail end of a giant squid, or perhaps like for the head of a monk wearing a cowl. And another thing is that the pectoral and pelvic fins of the angel shark, they kind of look like the sleeves on a monk's robe, and the upper body of the back of the angel shark is this dark brownish color like a monk's robes. And another thing that Charles Paxton and Robert Holland, they point out, is that angel sharks, they can also survive out of water for longer than a giant squid can. So again, at the end of the day, we don't have any kind of hard physical evidence for the giant squid. Again, we don't know for certain whether it was buried here in Denmark or dried and preserved and sent to Mecklenburg in Germany, and if that's the case, where it is now. And if it was buried here in Denmark, then was given an unmarked grave, and hence if it was a giant squid, then squid, they have these beaks of bone, and so perhaps there's this kind of giant squid beak buried in some unmarked grave here somewhere in Denmark. But if that's the case, then we have no idea where it is. But again, it's.
No, I was just thinking, Simon, you're talking now about the one that was captured before the Christian III, that it should be in a grave somewhere, if it exists.
Yeah.
But the funny thing is that the sources say differently. Some sources say that it was. Only very few sources mention this about the moat and putting it at the moat. So it's very difficult to find the history, the correct source for this. It really is at a point where not many things were written down, and
we don't even know the exact. We don't even know the exact date when the sea monk was caught and brought before the king. I think all we know for certain is that it happened in the reign of King Christian III.
If it was sent to Mecklenburg, why? Why would they have sent it there?
Why they would have sent it in Mecklenburg? I think it would have been like a. I think if I remember correctly, it was basically because the Duke of Mecklenburg were entered some kind of diplomatic treaty with the King of Denmark at some point, and the King Christian III, he also entered alliances with the then monarchs of France and Spain, and that's like how these illustrations of it, they ended up all the way down in France and Spain. A lot of like the most popular illustrations of the sea monk, as I mentioned, they were like made by various professors of medicine and zoology in France, Switzerland, and Spain, because they were like sent these accounts and illustrations of the sea monk, and then that entry of the sea monk with that drawing, they ended up in a lot of like scientific textbooks about marine life from the 16th century.
Yeah,
that's a really interesting story. My gut feeling is it's more likely to be an angel shark than a giant squid, but the Lord alone knows what it actually is.
I like have no idea. What are you going to say, Thomas?
No, I don't have so much to add to that. You covered a lot of it, Simon, and I mean, I'm not the most knowledgeable in the the scientific aspects of these kind of things, but it was a time where there was not really today everybody can see animals everywhere and we can kind of like, aha, this is what that is. Back then we had all these fake mermaids, fake basilisks, and this kind of thing kind of falls into a point in time where there were not even really museums. So these things were like shipped around and were in king's collections, and so a lot of these things we never know what really happened to them, because they were kind of, there was like cabinet of curiosity things, and it could have been the story also just grew, and became more of a rumor or more of a overblown story. So it feeds a little bit into folklore, but I think, of course, this example is one of the most concrete, which we can find a specific candidate who matches the thing mentioned.
Well, I think it's one of the things about stories like this is that it's very difficult to separate the folkloric parts, the Fortean parts, and the zoological parts. It's difficult to know where one begins and the other one starts. So, and the other one ends, and it's why one has to take a holistic view of all these accounts, and one has to look at them from every angle.
Yeah, and that's also, I would say, our approach, both me and Simon's approach, but also Hidden Mark generally. I mean, we recognize all these elements in many of the stories that exist, and keep an open mind, but also, like you say, the barriers are, they're not really there.
No, they're completely artificial.
If you want to support us and help us make more content like these, please press like, subscribe, follow our Facebook page, and check out our Patreon.
And there's the ghost of Joe Strummer, who's an ever more regular visitor to my little house, will tell you. Don't forget to ring the notification bell. Otherwise, you won't be told when the next episode's gonna be.
And that would be an awful pity, wouldn't it?
And so, ladies and gentlemen, here we are at the end of another episode. I hope you enjoyed it. And before we go on to what's coming next, I just want to say a big thank you to everybody who has been part of this week's show. A big, big thank you to Miss Isabel.
Bye.
Okay, Miss Isabel hasn't actually done anything in this week's show, but it's not the same without her. So I just wanted her to come on and say
Bye.
I also want to say a big thank you to my producer Louis, and to Richard Freeman and V. McCrinnan. And I want to say a big thank you to my guests this week, who have been the remarkable and indefatigable, how do you say it? I can't bloody say it. Ian Squibbs, him, something, Ian Squibbs, and to Simon and Thomas from Heath, Denmark. And like I said, that's the end of this show, but the good news is we'll be back on Wednesday, and I'm going to be talking to you about something jolly on Wednesday, but I can't actually remember what it is, so you're going to have to wait and see. But I'll also be back next Saturday afternoon at 3, and we have got, at the moment anyway, we have got the third part of our interview with Thomas and Simon from Heath, Denmark, and we have the indie whatever he is, Ian Squibbs, back talking about what transpired a couple of weekends ago when there was, allegedly at least, the biggest Loch Ness Monster hunt in a generation. And we ask some questions which I think need answering. So, I can't wait to see you then, especially you, Mr. McCrinnan. Are you watching the show this week, Mr. McCrinnan? Because if you are going to be watching it next Saturday, you're going to be there watching it, and I'm going to be there doing all the other stuff I do, so I'm going to be seeing you.